Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Ben Callahan, founder of Sparkbox and Redwoods Design System Community. I want to welcome you to episode 069 of The Question, where my co-host Shimaa Hassan and I facilitate a deep dive on the topic of rebuilding a design system mid-flight. If you have a moment, please get subscribed to the show out at bencallahan.com/thequestion. Let's get into it. Shimaa, will you tell us a little bit about your background? I want to know, what got you into design systems?
Oh gosh. I've been a designer for 16 years. I'm originally from Egypt, Alexandria, a city on the Mediterranean. I grew up there and I graduated from agriculture university, something completely different. I wasn't really good at school, so I just jumped on whatever. And then I always had a love for, design and making things with hand and craft. And just like the road took me into graphic design for a couple of years. And then I taught myself HTML and CSS. I was interested in interaction design and how people can, interact with your work. So I kind of moved into product design. Back in the days, it used to be called web design, and you slice your designs in Photoshop, and you know the spiel in our generation. And 6 years in, I met my husband. I moved to Canada, and when I came to Canada here in Toronto, I was like, I'll probably have to start from scratch. Like, I don't know how things work in, on the other side of the earth. And it turns out, design is universal. It was the exact same thing. And I joined a startup after startup, and I was a sole designer building teams and scaling up companies. And then I was like, I need to work with, different industry and different bigger team and have a design manager, very different from the startup world. So I joined the Square, and I stayed there for 4.5 years, and that's when I fell in love with design system. I initially was a product designer, like I always do, and then there was a need to build a component library on the ecom team that I was in. And I just jumped in, and I started going, and I built one. I was like, this is amazing. I want to do this for full time. So I moved internally to their design system team, and I stayed there for 2.5 years, and it was amazing. And then now I'm with Remote. It's a HR company. It's very, very different from Square and that business. And here I am back and doing a design system from scratch, and that's the topic for today. And then everyone is shipping features. Nothing is stopping. The company is moving. And but we need to kind of rebuild the design system from scratch. So how do we do that? That's why we're here today. So
Yeah.
that's
Okay. I want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say you studied agriculture?
yes.
Okay.
4 years of that.
What was your plan? What were you going to do?
So where I grew up, you need to have a university degree. Otherwise, you're not educated whatsoever. You're not going to even have any job. So this is what my, high school grades got me. Got accepted into this. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And I was just going to school for 4 years, but doing my own thing later on. And,
Amazing.
you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
I just went with the flow.
I love that. There's a scrappiness to folks in our space, I think, that you're kind of, modeling with that. So I appreciate you sharing all this. It's really cool to hear how folks come to the space. So afterwards, I want to talk to you a little about your time at Square too. I know some folks who've worked over there, so I'd love to hear if there's any overlap. That's really cool. Okay, so this week, after we spoke to Shimaa, just kind of making a plan, we kind of you had a lot of ideas for questions that we could ask, and so we kind of went through a half a dozen, and we settled on this idea, right, of rebuilding a system while it's sort of in mid-flight. And I think this is something a lot of folks in the space are it's a constant thing, systems are never done. We know this, right? And so how do we do that? How do we do this? If we think of the system as the foundation of our products, how do we replace the foundation of a bunch of products that are in, like you mentioned, in production, that are constantly being iterated on themselves? And so it's a complex topic. We asked 4 questions. The first was a range question. We said, how many times a month do you think about throwing your design system away and starting over? So that was kind of a fun question, but it actually gave us a nice way to kind of quantify or compare the other answers, which was really interesting. So I'll show you that here in a moment. And then we asked 3 open text questions. One was, if you chose to start over, what's the one decision you'd make differently on day 1? How do you keep product teams confident in a system that's actively being rebuilt underneath them? And then we just invited folks to tell us a story about rebuilding a system mid-flight. So we sent this to 1,061 design system practitioners. We got 53 responses, and you can, as always, click here to go see the raw data yourself. If you do your own analysis, please report back. I would love to hear what you see in the data. Okay, just a quick reminder, too, that the data we gather is never statistically significant. We're not trying to sort of prove some, factual connection here. We're just looking for interesting ideas to spur our conversation on today. And so in that first question we gave you a range of 0 to 5. How often do you think about throwing your system away, starting over? And we kind of saw like a fairly standard deviation across these, right? Like we saw the bell curve starting to emerge. I would imagine if we ran this with a lot of folks, for a longer time, we would just see that pattern show up. But Shimaa, when we first opened this up, you were like, that is not what I expected. Tell me what you were looking for in this data.
So I was surprised because I thought everyone wants to throw it out and start over. Like, there's new features every day. There's new ways to architect the system. There's things that we learn about every day from, folks that share their experience online. And like in the comments here, every once an hour, I wanted to do that constantly. I want to start over. Oh, what if we do this? What if we do that? What if we add that? What if we consolidate? We have 10,000 cards. We have 10,000 drop down menus. I'm constantly wanted to do that. And I was surprised by the data. It's like a 50-50 technically.
Yeah. Basically 50-50. Yeah. And I kind of did a split to see. And so if we look at like the 0, 1, or 2 as answers in the bottom half and 3, 4, and 5 as answers in the top half, you can see the split: 46%, 0, 1, or 2, and 54% in that top half. And then I did a little bit sort of a further kind of like just like digging a bit, And so I was trying to use some tools to gather the sentiment of the answers in the bottom 2 and then the top 2 categories. So 0 or 1 in this first question. Then I looked at sentiment across the rest of the open text answers. And I saw that those folks, it felt to me like, and sort of the data kind of bore out that a lot of those folks are people who have been through this exercise fairly recently, right? So I'm thinking like maybe, Shimaa, to your point, like if maybe that folks it's sort of a constant something that teams are thinking about, but if they've just gone through it, it's not, they're like, I'm not doing that again, right? So they're going to avoid thinking about that on a regular basis. The ones in the top 2 answers, so 4 and 5 in question 1, it felt like there was sort of an interesting constraint they were dealing with that was a little bit more about like the organization, maybe cultural, like we don't have the resources to even consider that, or I don't have the authority to make that kind of decision. That sort of thing kind of came through in those answers. Again, not statistically significant, like for real, but just like a sense, more of like the sentiment of what we were seeing there. So interesting to kind of break things down in that way. Okay. This is the point of the conversation where we kind of open up. So if you are just joining, jump in, grab the Fig Jam. The chat is open in Zoom. Please be respectful everywhere. We've done some work to kind of like gather the data in some interesting ways. And so you can see, I kind of captured quotes from the answers to question 2, which was about, if you were going to start over today, what would you do differently? And those are kind of categorized. There was a lot of answers around token architecture. A lot of folks sort of similar. A lot of folks were saying, oh my gosh, it's too complicated. I would simplify things, right? I think it's easy for these things to get over-engineered very quickly. So I think a lot of folks are feeling that tension too. There was quite a few answers around composability. I think some of the newer features, we were talking about this earlier, Shimaa, some of the newer features in Figma that's just kind of always iterating. I remember when variables were announced, people were like, oh, okay, I got to go redo my whole, like, I mean, that happens to us often, right? And so with sort of slots and some of that stuff that's coming in Figma and other things like this, this composability idea is a little bit more realistic for us on the design asset side. Always things about governance, ownership, clarity of like, who has what decisions to make. Some stuff around cross-functional alignment that was pretty relevant, and then a few folks talking about this idea of like leading with documentation as opposed to leading with building stuff, which I thought was kind of interesting. Okay, Erin, what's up? What's on your mind?
Yeah, this whole topic is super relevant right now for us. So I'm super glad we're covering it. We did a brand refresh last year, so we rolled out a new theme and we're able to sort of like get that going. But now we're in a whole parity audit and remediation. So we had differences across design, our iOS code implementation, and our Android code implementation. I won't even talk about web. But when we go through that, what we realize is there's a ton of breaking changes. And so I'm so curious about approaches there, like in
Yeah.
terms of like when you realize you have a large number of what could be breaking changes to your consumers, how do you work through that? Like, is it one at a time? Do you try to lump it into like every twice a year? Anyway, it sort of feels like we're again like building while releasing and how
Yeah.
do we not disrupt folks?
Yeah. Shima, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. When you are actually redesigning and making those decisions, you need to put the live product that is already in the hands of the customers in your mind while you're doing that. It's kind of like, a bag that you're going to drag for a little bit with you. So when you are creating a new component, you need to think about that state that is happening live today. How can we consolidate, add improvements, but not break what's live today?
Hmm.
Right. So it's like that balance. And then thinking about composability that was mentioned here and scalability. So be flexible with your new changes so that it can accommodate the existing state and then also a little bit of the future state. Because if the system is adopted well with the current state in mind, you will be able to make easy changes in the future while you are driving that plane.
Yeah, yeah. Taylor, raise your hand because I'm going to call on you after Guy goes because I want you to ask this clarifying question around breaking change. But Guy, what's up?
Hey, I'm gonna refer a bit to what Taylor just said, but
Perfect.
also to refer to what Erin you were talking about. So the way we approach it for our design system is we are very clear that we're not making any breaking changes for our consumers outside of major releases. So we have
Mm-hmm.
semantic versioning, and in if you're every 2 weeks we have a small release. It's not supposed to change anything for you. You update it. You should not. I mean, you should see new things, but you shouldn't have to go and fix or remove or re-add things into. And same thing in code. Um, we usually aim for one major release a year, and we are very, very intentional. We plan that several months in advance. We know, okay, for this year, for example, we're working on theming, and then we say, okay, theming is going to be our big theme, no pun intended, for the year, for this major release. What else can we throw in that we know is going to break stuff? So we put all things out at the same time. We give our consumers, we send an email 3 months in advance saying, hey, there's a new major release coming soon. Here are the type of things that are going to change. And then a month before, we tell them, okay, don't forget, there's a major release coming next month. Here are things you can start doing now to prepare. And then the day of, we have a whole thing. When we released version 3, we also released a command line tool to help basically automatically update 70% of the breaking changes for them,
Hmm.
mostly in code, in tokens. And so they needed to do a lot less than what they needed to do going from 1 to 2.
Yeah,
So that's also something we're trying to make that transition a bit easier.
that's really cool. Um, I love the idea that you're sort of like seeing the job of the system is not only to evolve the system, but the tooling around the system to help with things like that, Guy. That's really cool. Taylor, jump in, buddy.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add on to what Guy said. So 100% to that last bit, Ben. I don't think you can do that any other way, right? If you don't maintain the tools you build, then you're just shipping shit, right? So that's that. But I think the 3 points I wanted to add was +1 to Guy's bit around communication. How we frame that is we're trying to put together a service level agreement, right? So when folks know when they put in a bug, right, they can expect this much turnaround time, this much, whatever, in terms of just when they can hear back from us. And so what we do from there, second point, is we have a distinction of what it means to be a breaking change, a minor update, a patch update, or whatever, for the system that is separate from whatever the organization has. Spoiler alert, they don't have that shit defined. We do, they don't. So for us to go breaking change, they have to go, whoa, what? We're like, hey, hang on. It's a breaking in a minor way. We change a token. It's a minor package update, right? So like that understanding of what breaking change means to like your world versus like the product, in my opinion, very different. And the third one is more about architecture, right? So like this is, I think, what allows you to be able to say it will affect you, it won't, right? It depends on how your system's architected. And I mean this on a code perspective, right? Are you like in one mono repo, right? Where like one major update means everyone takes the update no matter what. And you got to be really, really careful, right? And thoughtful and whatever, right? Versus like component level versioning where your packages are separate. You can bump the button, right? And it not change much for other things. So like, it depends on that, I would say. And that's where like the question is like chicken and egg, right? If you're component level versus if you're like repo level, right? The comm structure is different. The amount of warning you want to give people is different. The amount of discussion you want to give. So it's not a clean answer. Like, I think that's the thing is it really depends on the org infrastructure and your systems infrastructure. Because then you start having the conversation of like, all right, old system versus new, right? Do we still own both and have to maintain like a migration guide between them? Is there a when we fix this, we deprecate the old and that's the transition flow? Like, what does that look like between generations of a system, even if we're talking about small updates, right? It doesn't have to be a major update like Guy was referring to. If it's a 2.5 to a 2.6, but that comes with something that someone didn't expect, right? Can they do that later? Is it now? What's the severity of that update, right? What else is tucked into that update that would make them want to do it? Like if you do a big accessibility update, sneak all your little updates in, right? Like no one's not going to take that. But anyway, that's my 3.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And there were some really interesting answers too in, let's see, where was this? Yeah. So what folks are doing to sort of like maintain the confidence and trust from their consumers while this stuff is happening. This idea of a parallel system, Taylor, is kind of what I hear you talking about. Like there were some really interesting answers here around like, let's see, yeah, like, so we left the previous system intact so it could be utilized as we worked on the new one, right? Shimaa, is that sort of what you're doing? Like, how are you managing this? Or do you have 2 versions of the system running? Yeah.
So the one that is being redesigned is being implemented, but the one that is live and active, not touching that. Making very minimal updates because, support requests is going to keep rolling. So sometimes you can just have a conversation with a team that is requesting. What's your timeline? Is this something that can wait for the next version or should we jump in and make update now? So it's like, balance. They have to tell us exactly what their timeline. And we also, the team that is working on the new system, we have to be very transparent with our progress, what's our timeline is, when things are going to be shipped and expected, right? So that they know what we're doing and they are aware when things are going to come so that they can align their timeline with us.
Yeah. Peter.
Yeah, I mean, this might not be helpful in the immediate, but Kim Williams did a fantastic talk about this at Clarity, I think back in 2019, somewhere around in there. No, 2017, 2018, where she talked about basically when she was at Indy transferring from basically one system to a new system, and the processes for kind of maintaining one while also trying to transition to another, but also needing an in-between system in there to also manage that. So there's some interesting kind of like complicated context right there, but I think, one of the things that I always try to think about is kind of the postmortem of a lot of these processes, where we're thinking about kind of the immediate need of it, but we also need to kind of plan and think about how do we make our structure less brittle in the future past this point.
Yeah.
So like, card should not necessarily be a component now. It should be a property of a container class that we can turn on and turn off. Things like that.
If you can, Peter, if you can find a link to that talk from Clarity, I'd love for you to drop that into there's a resource bar along the bottom. You can drop that in, or any place up above where it makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Stephen. Oh, you're muted, buddy.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might have been one of my answers about the parallel systems.
Okay.
But just like, I mean, I agree with what Peter just said too. I think after you go through this a couple times, you start trying to figure out like, how can we build this in a way where we can minimize breaking changes in the future while still being able to like get updates to people in a meaningful way. I mean, I agree with everything everybody has said. Even with Taylor, like, and Guy, like, we have to have understandings of what these different types of changes are. And everybody has to be on the same page with that, right? Like, what we consider breaking might be different from what a product team considers breaking. We have found like tremendous success with having the parallel systems, right? Because we just have products that like, they're just not going to have the time or resources to be able to go in and update all of their stuff. And they'll come back and say, we have a stable product right now. We don't want to mess with it. Like, it's in production, it's working. We don't want to blow things up. Like, we have a very small team on this. So that's what we do. We keep the old system in place while we're at the same time building out the new one. And people can use both, right? We ask them to kind of incrementally update, like, hey, if you're having a problem with the button, like, we suggest that maybe you just go and you switch out the button for the new buttons, where all that is possible. And we might make changes to both systems, right? There's a little bit of overhead with that. If we find an issue with, I'll give you a good example. We recently had to make a change to our checkbox. We had some sizing problems or some accessibility stuff we wanted to work out. We made that change in both systems. It wasn't a breaking change, but we wanted users of the legacy system to also get that. So we do that where we need to. But it's been relatively successful. People have been able to kind of migrate at their own pace, and they don't feel like pressure, which, that's what kind of destroys the confidence, is when they're like, you mean we have to like use up all of our resources to migrate over the next 2 months? Like, we had other stuff we needed to do. Then that really destroys confidence, in my opinion, is when you have to start dealing with that. So
yeah, what's the motivation for people to switch in the scenario where you're just kind of maintaining both?
I mean, we kind of frame it like, if you want the new features, then you kind of have to move over to the new system. That's where you're going to get, a lot more of the benefits. And this is how I answered one of the other questions. I think being able to communicate what the benefits of this change are.
Yeah.
Why are we building a new system? You have to sell it to people. You're selling a product. You have to be able to demonstrate, like, in our case, it's a massive token architecture change, right? Because we want to be able to support a lot of different themes. And we're able to demonstrate you get a lot out of this for future scalability by moving to this new system. So, you really have to show that, and sell those advantages.
That was another theme, Stephen, thanks for sharing that. That was another theme that kind of emerged in the data. Was one of the ways you can help teams maintain their confidence in the system is what you just said, demonstrate the value of that migration. Like, why are you doing this? Like, help them understand that stuff. I'm going to go Taylor. Peter, your hand is still up. I don't know if you have more to share or if that is just, jump in, Taylor.
Sweet. I'm going to do a little poll because I just had an idea.
Okay.
So there's 24 of us here, right? So I think we dance around this a lot. The idea that, like, when a new system launches, when a new version of something, everyone's magically just going to update to the new thing. And I've literally never experienced working at a place where that's actually happened. So can you pop up your hand if you've ever worked at a place that had an actual deadline, a planned transition period where designers and engineers had to swap things in live code out from one system to another, whatever, some sort of formal declaration from leadership that says, do this. Put your hand up if that's ever happened.
In like a very short amount of time, you're saying?
In
like
some sort of official way.
Okay.
Any sort of way that is like, a leader said, this is what we're doing. and now make a plan for it.
Okay. So we've got a quarter of the hands up.
It's a lot
Maybe.
smaller than
Yeah.
I think we think, right? Because like this is the challenge, right? I think we could talk about like all the benefits of the system, all the things we can help with, all the whatever. But if they have no reason to move from one to the other, then what the hell are we advertising? Right? And I don't mean by reason, right? Like in the sense that like we can, for example, I could say for my work at Mayo, right? So the system we're building now is fixing a lot of the accessibility gaps, a lot of the tooling gaps, all the things that the previous generation didn't have. So the cost benefit of it is pretty clear. We can go down the list on that matrix and say, this didn't have this, it now has this, right? We're building this the way we wanted it to be built in the first place. There are some consumers who are like, great, hey, remember that thing that didn't work? Well, we built our own in the meantime. So now you have to tell us why we need to get onto yours. And my answer is, no, I don't. It's not the design system's job to force you to move. If leadership tells you to move, it's different. Then I will write migration guides. I will show you a one-to-one pairing, right? But we talk about needing all of this stuff on this transfer, this like swap out stuff. And I feel like each time I've had this discussion, I keep going, well, has anyone actually done this? And everyone's like, no, it's never actually happened. Or leadership never actually makes good on that promise of we're going to make folks update, right? Especially a large company. So it's interesting because I think we architect so much of our thought around that. The idea that old system will be updated into new, right? In design files and code and whatever. When we're making that assumption that yes, it's the right thing, they'll get the benefits of the new thing if they switch. But unless folks are going into shipped code already and making edits, that's a re-delivery for them. And that's a huge amount of change that we're just saying is, oh, it's no big deal. You just change it. Like you just bump a package. Yeah. Then they got to go through all their testing again, you know? So we cascade a lot. And I don't think we recognize that when we talk about things like this. But not recognize. We don't call out it enough.
Yeah, it's a good point. Shimaa, jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. I want to add to that, going back to the point about demonstrating the value. So, for example, in my case, the new system have the 3-tier token architecture because the previous one was just using row color scale, you know, gray 900 everywhere, things like that. So that was like a huge change for the team. Was also the new system will support a new feature that we're going to be adding, which is white labeling, right? And making the system multi-theme and all of that, multi-brand and all of that stuff that the existing system didn't. So I just recorded a quick loom to show the team, here is the current system, here's how it's architecture, and how this is how I'm thinking about the new one. So kind of bringing people on board on your journey. What's the current state of the system, how I'm thinking about it, and get feedback. But I want to like share a quick pro tip on looking at the current state of the product and the code. You know, you need to have, with this, you know, the age of AI, right? You need to have your front end, you know, local div environment on your computer as a designer so that you can, you know, use clock code or whatever code of choice. Where is this gray 900 is used today? So you can see a list of usage, and then you can make a really informed decision. How is that going to be transferred into a semantic token? You know, where is this 900 cards are used in the system today? And then when you are making an informed decision on when in the new system, we're going to consolidate into XYZ, then you have this point A, point B kind of scenario laid out to your engineer, your team, so that they can get on board with this direction. So yeah, it's something I'm actively doing here is like looking at the existing codes constantly while I'm making new system decisions, and also saying why to the team.
Yeah. So it sounds like two things there, Shimaa. One was the like sort of attached to an organizational mandate, right? Like to enable this thing that leadership cares about, we are upgrading the system, and you can get that benefit of white labeling or better accessibility or whatever by migrating to the new version of the system. So that definitely I've seen work. And then you're also talking about AI as a helper in this process. So let's come back to that because I think there's probably a lot to unpack there. Guy, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to something that Taylor said about the because we had similar things. I mean, I raised my hand when he asked about was there a mandate from above? Yes, technically there was, but was it enforced? No. If every team is doing their own thing, no one cares.
I do have
and
on the portal.
and we had those examples where they needed something and we didn't have it, so we told them, hey, build your own while we're doing something that's going to be more for the wider organization. And then the question that you very appropriate question is, why would they then adopt a new version if they already have their own solution?
Yeah.
And what I've seen in our large organization is that sort of like the lower maturity, I would say, of the organization actually plays into our hands in that case, because the perceived cost of either building it their own way or having to continue maintaining it by themselves is usually higher than just adopting the new version or upgrading to the new version of the design system, because they need to consider accessibility, which a lot of times they just don't have the level of maturity in that area. They need to, for example, if they're looking at theming, yes, they can do things that are kind of like quick fixes, but they don't have the ability to build something that's gonna scale the way we do. So a lot of times we found teams that said, you know what, we would rather wait for the design system to have that ready instead of building it ourselves.
Yeah, interesting. There's so much conversation these days around the pressure for teams to work faster. And what I hear you saying is it may be an artificial pressure, right? Like when they're faced with having to make a choice, they would maybe choose to wait if they know they're going to get something that's quality and it prevents a certain amount of, rework in their future.
I don't think it's this. I mean, they're still required to move faster and faster and faster, but I think they have other things that they prioritize as they need to get to first. And if they can, wait a bit longer with, okay, we're going to have it updated drop down, they can do that.
Yeah. Gotcha. Taylor.
Yeah, I'm dropping an article in chat. It was written by Josh Clark way back in the day. I use every time I have this kind of crisis of thought, I go back to this one because I start to remember that, like, all right, awesome. New tools, new features, new whatever. The system's job is not to be a place for exploration. It's meant to be a place of stability, right? Depending on how you have it set up, right? At our org, that's what it is. We are a place of stable infrastructure. We are a body of work that is ready for new change, but does not just roll it out willy-nilly, right? We are there to correct the bad behaviors of old. So it puts us in a combative place kind of at all times. So it's helpful for me, I think, to come into like this and reread this thing, because it also gives the language of like, yes, that's great. We love you to keep building that. But like, until 5 feature teams need that, it's silly for us to get involved, right? It's more overhead for you. Or when those 5 teams, like we have, for example, we have a search component right now that lives in the old design system code that only one product uses, and it's ridiculous that it exists there. And we've been like, cool, this is for your group. Like, we should never have gotten involved in maintaining this for you, because now we're a blocker, right? So that's where we start to go. Is like, great, does taking the maintenance of this object off of you, now that it's grown, right, unblock your team and accelerate it? That's the system's job. We will maintain the normalized thing, right? And so what we've tried to do is introduce what we've called an additive threshold. And so anytime we talk about new things or changes to the system or adjustments to an object, we kind of counter with like, cool, if you hit our additive threshold. And it's kind of our silly default like counterpoint. But the idea is, how many times is this thing like gonna make an impact, right? So if we're gonna, for example, build a new component, right? If it's just for your feature that you're testing, we're not getting involved. It needs to make a bigger splash than that, right? The juice has to be worth the squeeze for us to get involved. And we've set a threshold on that. For example, like tokens, right? We're not just going to pollute our token architecture with every random color new teams want to try. They need to have at least 4 applications of that color consistently, for example, for us to warrant elevating it to a token. So we've started to try to think about that mantra for different things, right? Components, features, documentation, whatever, and then try to relay that to our consumers so they then become part of it. And we're like, hey, we'd love to build that for you, but we need a little more so that it's worth both of our time. And then come back and talk to us. And it creates that loop where you have to go check in with them, and like you build your own kind of like tracking log of unofficial feature requests, where you can start to build the record of, oh yeah, that's 5 people have asked for this and they just didn't submit a feature request, but now we have evidence, and then you go back to them, you start having those guys. So to give that triage, right?
Yeah. I think I agree with you, Taylor, but I also, like, right now I'm working with a team that is really struggling because the sort of parent system, it's a multi-system scenario, and the parent system has been just like you're describing here, almost rigorous in sort of, denying things based on what the kinds of factors, like the idea of like an additive threshold sort of measure that you're describing. And what's happened is it's like created animosity between, the consuming teams. In this case, it's other smaller systems, like more focused systems, product domain systems, in working with the core system. And so I guess my question back to you is like, is there something there around, I don't know if it's just like the posture you take or like how you answer or like how that communication happens? Like, how are you maintaining good relationships with these folks with a model like this is what I think I'm getting at.
The only thing that's helped me is to remember that, like, I'm not the code, right? I'm not the system. It doesn't matter, right? So like, I try not to get defensive if someone's like, hey, the token architecture is trash. It's like, cool, it ain't me, your comment thing. It's that it's not working for you. And then I can figure out what the hell's going on. Like, that's why I feel this job is customer service 24 hours a day. Because you got to ask that question, like, why isn't that token working? Is it the names? Is it the whatever? So like to keep that relationship healthy, the first thing I try to do is assume that like no one's at fault with the thing. We just unpack it, right? And that helps tend to boil them down, because 9 times out of 10, it's something that's happening in their environment, not ours, right? But we don't want to be like, meh, so you got to like slow down and give it. So it's honestly taking that beat of like, all right, you're commenting about the system, which is much larger than me, and I don't care because it's not me. Like, that's honestly the first thing that I try to do. And then there's someone put a comment about the can it be both? And I think this ties into that, my second answer to yours. I think yes, but I think it depends on what innovation we're talking about, right? Like, move fast, break things? Fuck no, should not be in the system, right?
Yeah.
Innovative new accessibility feature? Absolutely should be in the system, right? So like, innovation as like a bucket term, I think it's like a farce in terms of like this, right? So like, maybe wrong for me phrasing it that way, but I think standardization in terms of proven helpful solutions, things that scale, that's really what it is. Exploration that helps at scale and then factors in all that change management.
Yeah. I'm going to get to you, Peter, but Shimaa, do you have a response to this? Like, how is this all sitting with you and your, is this feeling like how you're operating as well?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced like that type of tension before, between, new, old, and teams really feeling strong about what they want to add to the system. We need this, bespoke input because of our specific use case. But why?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned in the comments, like, everyone needs to chill.
Yeah.
You really feel strongly about this, go build it, but we're not adding it in the system.
Yeah.
And I think to go back to what Taylor mentioned about having a one place for these triaging and system decisions. I have one tag that says approved, will not do, or will do in the future, or completed. So like, having one place where you can like, what did we talk about this, a new input, if someone in the future asked about it, then yes, let's talk if there's multiple queries about the same thing. But also being transparent about the decision that we're not adding this weird gradients to the system, something like that.
Yeah.
Be very, very put your foot down situation.
Yeah. And it's always with kindness, like, this is the trick. It's like, because we don't want to burn these bridges, like, it's really, and like Taylor said, it's oftentimes it's just misunderstandings that lead to these things, right? Alignment on what the intent of the system is. I'm going to, Peter, you're next in a second, but I want to give Erin, Tallulah, and Liz a warning, because I'm watching this little thread unfold in the chat, and I want to hear more about this idea, Liz, especially that you're saying you don't want to maintain more than one. So let's bring that into the conversation too, as opposed to a lot of folks here have spoken so far about the idea of maintaining multiple versions of a system to give space and time for migration. So Peter, before we get to that, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, all these things are very interrelated that we're talking about. I think they ultimately come back to kind of the rigidity of your system. Not being able to support something, it's because, we structured our system to be exactly X, Y, and Z. I take Taylor's position about 85, 87% of the way. But where I differentiate is I actually want to be involved with those kinds of things that you all are developing as early as humanly possible, not at the point after it's got, oh, there's 5 different needs for this. I want to know when there's need 1 and 2. The point of that being is I can help influence how that idea or that need is going to be gracefully integrated into the system eventually. So my goal is not necessarily to block you from doing it, because I accept that this is all code and the teams can do whatever they want at any time anyway, regardless of how I feel about it. So the best thing that I can do is try to help influence them to kind of gracefully integrate that into the system. The point of the system is not to, I don't believe that the system is there to kind of be necessarily a rigid infrastructure. It is there to be an adaptable infrastructure so that the system can continue to evolve, so that you don't need to build system 1, system 2, system 3. You have system 1 is a continuous system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more or less where I was going before I kind of fall off the barrel there.
Yeah, you're good. So I hear what you're saying, and I think I definitely agree with this sentiment of like, hey, go build your own thing, but we're also here to support that work. And there are patterns that we've established in the system, right? Like you can compose new things from smaller pieces of the system. You can follow those design and development patterns that we've established. And maybe that makes this a whole lot easier in the future for you to do that migration, or for us to bring that work into the system, right?
Right. And we can actually kind of like say, like, hey, we can accelerate your development of this thing if you work with this thing, and this thing that's already part of the system.
Yeah.
So rather than going completely like ape shit over here, like, go like 70% ape shit on this thing.
Yeah. Gotcha. Taylor, jump in.
2 bits. So one, back to Peter, and then when I drop some stuff into the big jam on the right that I want to point out.
Yeah.
Peter, I'm with you. And I think the only thing that makes me like go, that's a really dangerous stance is like how fast tech moves, right? We can't simply say the same system will always be right. Like, for example, we were architecting full mass on a React system, and then we heard from some leader, hey, we're shifting off of that decision. It's like, yo, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can just change that 8 months into our remit. Now we have to build a second thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love the ethos, but like, I think the reality of that is just not always true, right? Depending on the size of the organization you are, right? But that's aside.
Right, and that's where the maturity aspect of
Right.
it comes. Because if you're working with people that understand and respect and appreciate this kind of thing, it's easy conversation to have. But if you're working with people that just all of a sudden just kind of drop trowel on you just for like no
and that
no
goes
warning
back
whatsoever,
to
then
someone asked in chat about like, was tagging alpha and beta and all that stuff helpful? And that's exactly what we had. We had folks go, wait a minute, wait, why is beta different from version 2? Why is 3 in beta and 4's in alpha? It's like, okay, more confusion. Like we've added another layer of this is not helping, right? To even get us like, are they separate systems? Are they separate versions? So all that, yes. I dropped in a screenshot of our feature status communication attempt. This is a kind of a culmination of a few versions of it in the different places, and we're just trying to see if this works. But this is screenshots, right? So the idea is we have an Airtable that we link into our documentation site, and anytime we hear a request for something or a feature request actually comes through formally, we add it to this table. And all this does is create a central place where all the ideas start coming through. So we can go, something's been proposed, something's in progress, something's being worked on, if it's in a stage of development, whatever. And then we draw a hard line between like the components that we build, and then anything that we're considering a feature or some initiative that may be larger than a component or something that's not component related, whatever. And I don't, to be clear, don't know if this is going to work yet, but this is like building on a few different flavors of this methodology to try to get to this kind of like, hey, if you want to check something, you want to propose something, start here first, just take a look, right? And then we can link our discovery artifacts and whatever, so that the hope is one of two things can happen. Either we can go, hey, great, 5 more teams need a drop down. Now we know we have enough evidence, right? Or team 2 that wants a drop down goes, we can just use team 1's starting point, maybe get closer. Oh, it didn't work, right? Oh, it did work, second user, right? And then we just keep touch on this stuff to Shima's point, like going back with them and talking to people. And someone else mentioned wanting to be ahead of the process, right? Wanting to be like in the discussions early, like, absolutely, this is how we're trying to do that. Because you're right, you got to know from it before it ships, right? And you not to block them, but to understand.
I love this, Taylor, but I also think it requires a different mindset on the part of your consumers too, right? Like this also like they're not, in my experience, because we try to set this up with almost all of our clients, and they a lot of times we have to work with those consuming teams quite a bit to get them to do the work, to come here, to submit the thing, to go look and see, are there other things that are,
100%.
I mean, it's a slog sometimes to get them to want that. So it requires some hand-holding, but I do think it's worth it, you know? And the other thing I will say is like communication with them as that concept or whatever idea they've submitted evolves is so huge. Like keeping them in the loop. And we're trying to find ways to like it's really easy to automate a lot of that. You know, like anytime something changes to their item, they just get notified. That makes them feel like things are happening, right? Like, oh my goodness, yeah, I submitted this. They're responsive to my ideas. So I love it.
And that's also helpful if you ever run on the same ticketing system. At Mayo, we don't, right? So like this is a solution in between there, right? So to your point, yes. The other thing we did do that I did mention is this a talk through of this page happens at all of our ops hours, right? We just reference like, hey, let's take a look at the feature status stuff. It's a link on our feature request stuff. So like, it's like, hey, want to see what, you know, the status of your thing? Go here, because we're not all in the same project management tool where that stuff can be automated. So this is a manual in between layer that I'm hoping becomes a storytelling tool to do all this, so we can just constantly have this link up. Like, cool, let's use this to tap the conversation, and we'll see.
Yeah, love it. Shimaa, do you have a response? And then I want to get to Erin.
Yeah, I think this is really cool to see like this feature status and the status table. We have a similar, more simplified approach. We call it, our system called Norma Design System. So we have something called Norma Labs, where it's like a file, it's a published library. So it's like owned by the product. Design system can help. But it's like these ideas that they are brewing that is not still like full on mature enough to be graduated to the system, or it's just used by one team, but they feel like it's going to scale for the whole organization. So they can come into the Norma Lab, they can work together, different product teams, and then the system can help and give feedback. At least is using our tokens, at least is using, you know, we are co-creating together, but it's not really officially a system component yet, but we are creating that space for them to explore and put ideas together. So yeah.
That's great. Love that. We've heard this idea of labs or playgrounds come up quite a bit in a lot of these conversations. So I think we need to have a session on like how that gets implemented. I see your question there, Taylor. I think it's tricky. Erin, jump in.
Yeah. So similarly, we have, you know, an intake process, and we take them and folks can kind of check in on their intakes or see similarities. I think the one thing that gets interesting or challenging, and I'm curious about, is the idea of, again, we saw like a slew of intakes because some of our work was out of parity, like our iOS and Android implementations were just different enough that it was causing confusion. And so now we're remediating that. So we get to a point where we just have a significant number of updates, and each of our components is versioned individually. So, right, like you can roll out a new version of each component. I think where I get like, or where we're sort of turned about right now is the idea of like, cool, well, but we have 20 components that have their own new version. Is that when you start to say like, hey, big breaking change, like do it all at one time, versus previously we sort of roll them out one at a time. And we usually like go a version up so people can adopt it as they can. But again, we can only maintain but so many old versions as we have a decent sized team. Like I admit lucky, but it still gets unmaintainable.
Yeah.
Anyway, curious.
That's great. And this is, I think, gets to what I was asking about earlier. I don't know if Liz, or I don't remember if it was Tallulah, someone else was talking about this, about, hey, we don't want to maintain too many versions. So if anybody wants to jump in on that, I'd love to hear that perspective. Tallulah, I see your hand up. Do you want, is that?
Yeah. I was just saying we don't have the capacity to. It's not so much that we don't want to. It's a matter of we can barely keep up with the most recent version. So we'll still leave it available, but we're not going to fix bugs. We're not going to, you know, add to it, that kind of thing. And then the Figma library, just because we have had better results with getting designers to update right away. we just say we'll leave the old file available for 6 months, but we also say, hey, me and my team have extra hours in the next 2 sprints available to help you if you have any trouble. So you don't have to do it right now, but you have support in doing it right now. And I think
Yeah.
really encouraged people to just hurry up and get it done instead of waiting the 6 months.
Yeah, that's cool. So like using sort of like dangling the carrot of support as opposed to the stick of it goes away or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, you can wait. Nobody's forcing you, but we're here for you for the next 2 sprints. So
Yeah. Got it. Nice. Liz, are you, I want to get you in, so jump in if
Yeah.
you're willing to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I mean, I haven't been to a question in a really long time because my team was disbanded, and I am now like back in a role, and the design system's like part of my role. It's like I have more things, but yeah, it's me and a new designer who's like part time on our design system. Like Tallulah said, like we don't have the capacity. But even when I've been on dedicated teams, I don't know if I've ever met a design team or a design system team that's been like, oh, yeah, we have tons of capacity. We aren't looking for work to do. And like the idea of trying to keep track of multiple versions is just like, it's really tedious and it's hard to do, especially the longer that they live. And so I don't know. I just don't know of any design system team that's going to say like, oh yeah, we have the capacity to do this. And I think even this isn't like versioning like an old system to a new system, but I think back to my experience at IBM when we had the Carbon team who was building React, and we had another team who was building Angular. And in Watson Health, we had developers who were using all of the different technologies. And we're going, these experiences aren't consistent because Angular wasn't the same as React. So as a design system team, our job was like, literally, we built a testing architecture to componentize tests, not the UI. So that way we could compare the Angular and the React versions to like call out the differences.
Oh my goodness.
Because we depended on those two systems being the same.
Yeah.
Our entire team like didn't build UI work. We built testing work.
Wow. Good grief.
So yeah, I don't know. It's always a lot of work.
Yeah. Welcome back, Liz. Thanks for being here. And Taylor said it in the chat, but I'll make sure I say this too to all of you. Like everybody's welcome here, even if these questions aren't particularly relevant in your current role. So I know, especially this week, Guy mentioned to me earlier that like these ones felt a little bit like if you didn't have this specific experience, you couldn't really answer. So I apologize for that. Peter, you got 30 seconds. What do you got?
A really great, easily culturally integratable question that you can throw into designers to kind of manage a lot of this stuff is, don't show me different, show me better. Don't give me a new version of a button because you think it's aesthetically a better version of a button. Show me a better version of the button because it has a purpose that is better than the one that it solves today. And that will allow designers to kind of self-filter and kind of really focus on like, do I actually need something different from this? And when they do bring it something to you, they can actually kind of annotate why it is something that should be integrated into the system. And it'll also help alleviate your workload.
Yes. That's really great. I love that differentiation. Shimaa, last word. We're at the end. I can't believe the hour's gone. This happens every time, but what's your takeaway so far from the conversation?
I think we all feeling the same feelings. We all share the same experience, the same challenges. So I love this conversation, and we all learn it from today's discussion. And yeah, it's never enough time to have a therapy session about design systems.
Yeah, that's right. It did feel a little therapeutic today. So thanks for bringing this one to us. Couple quick announcements. I have one team coaching spot opening up in March. If you're interested in having some external support with your system team, please reach out. You can get all that info here. Redwoods is open. We're doing this kind of like digging every week over there. So if you like this, take a peek at the values and see if that aligns with who you are, who you want to be, who you want to be in the space. You can see some of the things that folks in Redwoods have written in the last week or so right here, and also things from the larger systems community that are going on. So please, if you have other links to drop that are system related, drop those. I'd love to hear if you're looking for a new gig or if you have something to celebrate, please drop those here as well. And if you have feedback or ideas for future questions, please give them to us there. It's 1 o'clock Eastern. Thank you all so much for being here. Shimaa, you rock. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Bye, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on episode 069 of The Question. This format doesn't work unless folks like you are willing to share some of your experience and then show up here in learning mode. Remember, you can get access to the raw data, the collaborative Fig Jam, and all of the recordings for this episode on my website, bencallahan.com. If you or your team could use an outside perspective in your design system program, I'd be honored to support you in that way. There's much more information about my individual and team coaching program over on the website. Thanks again for being here, and remember, stay in learning mode.